Sota Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph, overcoming our demons, Hayarei Verach Halevav. Our biggest fears are not the fears of things outside of us. Usually we think that's what we're afraid of. The rockets being fired at us from Gaza, and if one's in the line of fire, one's afraid. What are you afraid of? You're afraid of the rockets being fired from Gaza. But that's not the biggest source of fear. The biggest source of fear is the fear within us. And the avodah, the practice, the work of overcoming the fears of our souls, the fears within us, is the avodah of bitachon, of faith in Hashem and trust in Hashem. Let's see how we work this out from the Gemara. We're still busy on the pasuk in Perek Chof in Devarim and Parashat Shoftim. V'yasfu hashotrim ledaber el ha'am. The police, the shotrim, continue to speak to the people after the Kohen has given his little speech. Then the shotrim come and they speak. V'amru mi ha'isha yarei v'rach halevav. Who is afraid and of soft heart. So this is a study in fear. What greater fear is there than the fear of war when the soldier is about to go into battle? That's the moment of the greatest fear. And this parasha is a study in fear. Anybody who has this fear and is soft of heart, yelech v'yashov leveito, should go home. V'lo yimaset levavechav kilvavo, and he should not melt the hearts of his fellow soldiers the way his own heart is melted. Says our Mishnah on Daf Mem Daled Amud Aleph on this posuk, we have a machlokes Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili, which we've learned already. That Rabbi Akiva says it means literally somebody is afraid, and Rabbi Yossi Aglili says Zeh hamityarei min ha'aveirot shebiyado. This is talking about a person who's afraid of his own averot, things he's done wrong. Lefichach taltalo haTorah et kol elu she'yachzor biglalan, and that's why the Torah includes the others. It's not really because the big issue is about the person who's planted the vineyard, the person who's bought a house. It's just to include it all in one group so that an individual will not be embarrassed to pull out. If the only reason to pull out was because you've done averot, you've done things wrong, then everybody who pulls out will be revealing himself as a sinner. But now that there's a whole group of different people, there are different reasons why you might be pulling out. If somebody pulls out, you don't know the reason that he's pulling out for. So as to encourage him to pull out. Rashi says, Lefichach she'ayarei zehu ayarei me'averot. Since yarei means he's afraid of his wrongdoings, Tala HaTorah bana v'nata v'yires lachzor biglalan. The Torah includes the building or the planting or the becoming betrothed to altogether, kadesh yitle bekacha chazara, so that people will assume the reason for his pulling out is one of these other reasons. Velo yitbayesh lomar me'averot shebiyado hu yarei, and he won't be afraid of admitting to himself that he's afraid of all the averos in his hands, and therefore v'chozer, he will pull out. We want him to pull out. We don't want somebody in the group, we don't want somebody in the army who's afraid of the averot shebiyado, because that could damage everybody else. We want him to pull out. Not only do we want him to pull out, but the Ramban brings a Bal Halachas Gedolish. Remember, the Bahag is one of the first halachas for him that we've got written in the time of the Goinim, and the Bahag says, Mitzvat lo ta'aseh. This is a mitzvah lo ta'aseh. Shelo yimana milashuv. You're not allowed to stay back. You've got to pull out. And if you don't pull out, you're over. That's an avera. Shelo yimaset levavechav kilvavo, because by not pulling out, you're going to be afraid in battle, and that'll be worse. You want to pull out before we go to battle, that's fine. But to pull out once we're in battle, that would be serious. We don't want that to happen. So much so that the Mishnah goes on to say that when the police were finished, they used to ma'amidim zekifim lifneim v'acherim me'achoreim. They used to put soldiers, guards, in the front of the army and at the back. And they had axes. They had an axe in their hand. And if once they went out to battle, people deserted and left the army, they can chop the person's leg off if they want to. There was no limit to their authority in dealing with deserters. If you wanted to pull out before, there's the opportunity to do that for the various reasons we've dealt with, but not to pull out once you're in the middle of it. Why? Shetchilat nisa nefila, as the Gemara says further on, it corrects it, because the beginning of nefila is nisa, the beginning. This is such an important phrase, because in learning here about fear, we're not just learning about going to war. We're not just talking about that. We're talking about all fears, about overcoming fear within oneself, about being able to go into risky situations. How do you deal with that? How do you do that? The thing is to understand that tchilat nefilah, the beginning of collapse, is nisa. is running away. That's the beginning of collapse. That phrase, if we would all understand that phrase and remind ourselves every single day, the beginning of collapse is running away. Running away from who? Running away from ourselves. It's running away from ourselves. Our failures are usually not caused by forces outside of ourselves. Our failures are not caused by other people challenging us. Our failures are usually caused by the fears within us that we don't confront and deal with and embrace and work with. Instead, we run away. When we run away from our own weaknesses, when we run away from our own fears, that's tchilat nefilah. That's the beginning of collapse. And the Mishnah brings psukim to prove it. And then there's a machlokes in there as to whether this is milchemes reshus dafka or milchemes mitzvah, which the Rambam paskins is dafka milchemes reshus, and so on. Says the Merume Soda, says the Netziv, why do we give these soldiers the authority to chop off the legs of people? It's a terrible thing. Somebody's running away from the battle and you chop his legs off. Why? Because kol ha'mevakesh lachzor should be able to kapeach et shoko hatamu mishum din roideh. This is because you're endangering the lives of other people. Your own fears are infectious. Fear is infectious. And you don't have the right to infect the army with your fears. You've got a problem, that's your problem. You should have dealt with that before we went to battle. Now that we're on our way to battle, you don't have the right to infect others, and we have to protect others. This is not a punishment. We're not punishing you for deserting. We're protecting the people who've remained in the army, so as not to be infected by the fears that you're putting out there. Even though he's not doing it deliberately, he's not endangering anybody's life deliberately, he's afraid, Nebuch, he's got fear. Kim shiarei vorech. He has an unbelievable chidush that the Netziv deduces from the Gemara in Sanhedrin, where it says, even if a katan is rodef, even if the person who's endangering the life of another is a child, you kill the child. Because this isn't about punishment. You say, the child's not a baronshi, how can you kill a child? It's not about killing the child, it's about protecting the innocent person. And whether what's risking the innocent person's life is a snake or a dog or a human, you've got to get rid of the danger. If there's no other way to do it apart from killing them, then you have to kill them. And so here too, we're not interested in whether the person deserting the army is doing it deliberately or isn't doing it deliberately. We're not interested in that. What we're interested in is people's lives are at risk. He's spreading fear. And in order to stop the spreading of fear, these soldiers are given this enormous authority. And the Rambam talks about what it is, and the beautiful Rambam in the Halacha Tesvav of Perek Zayin. He says, once you get into the war, then you've got to do it with all your heart. You're not allowed to think of your wife and your children and your family. You can't think about them when you're at war. You've got to be focused on the war, and anybody who isn't focused on the war is committing a lo ta'aseh, a negative transgression. If because of the fear he's spreading, the war is unsuccessful, he's to blame. He carries that defeat on his shoulders. From our posuk, that you're not allowed to cause fear in other people, and if you do that, that's on you. And anybody who fights with all their heart and is not afraid, and all his intention in the fighting the war is kiddush Hashem, he's doing the right thing, he's doing what Hashem wants him to do. There's a promise that he will not come to any harm or any damage. He'll build a good home in Yisrael. He'll have a wonderful life. He'll have olam haba. If you're doing it for the right reason and without fear and with total trust in Hashem, there's a promise that this will turn out well. And again, we're not only talking about war. We're talking about the battles we walk into every morning of our lives as we walk out of shul in the morning and we begin the battles of the day. This is a daily thing. If we're able to go into it with proper bitachon and without fear, and to understand, we'll see in a moment what we have to do to achieve that. There's a promise that Rebbeinu Shalom makes amazing things happen. Wonderful coincidences start to happen, and things fit into place, and we're surrounded by a protective force. If we can just go about our work in that particular way. And the Orach Chaim says, it's an amazing piece of Orach Chaim based on a Zohar, which I happened to be learning a few days ago. The Orach Chaim says Rabbeinu Amru, on our Gemara, Ze ayarei me'aveirot shebiyado, learning from Rabbi Yossi Aglili, even though we don't paskin like Rabbi Yossi Aglili, but we learn a lot from him. Perush al derech umro pachado b'tzion chatim, shekol mi sheyesh biyado aveirot, libo yared v'chared. Anybody who has done aveirot, which means all of us, their heart is afraid. V'chared, who are you afraid of? Look at that word in the Orach Chaim. Me'atzmo. You're afraid of yourself. That's the cause of the fear. You're afraid that you're going to trip yourself up. That's what you're afraid of. And even if you don't know that you've done any averot, says the Orach Chaim, the fact that you're feeling afraid is proof that they're averot. When you're feeling fear, you know there's something wrong. You know there's vulnerability. You know you've done something wrong. You know they're averot. That's the nature of fear. As the Zohar says in Parashas Miketz, Itman de dachil v'lo yada mima ihu dachil. There are people who are afraid, they don't know what they're afraid of. They just feel fearful. Begin inun chatai de lo yada di inun chatoin lo yashkach b'hu. It's for those little things that we've done wrong, and you don't even know you've done them wrong. Our Gemara says you spoke between Tefillin Shorosh or Tefillin Shiyad Shorosh, or you spoke between Baruch She'amar and Yishtabach. Little things that we do and we don't even realize how serious they are, but they cause fear. Even subconsciously, you don't even realize, but they cause fear. Fear is caused by personal inadequacy. That's the cause of fear. So what are we meant to do about that? To remove the source of the fear. What is the source of the fear? Averot. This is a major chiddush. Where do we hear such thing? The source of fear is averot. The source of fear are things I've done wrong. I know I'm not pure. I know I'm not perfect. That's the source. If I knew I was perfect, I would be able to have proper bitachon. I could rely on the miracles that Hashem would do for me. So what do you do? But the fact is, we've all done these averot, as we learned yesterday and the day before. So the answer is the Gemara in Kiddushin. If a man says, "Hareat mekudeshit li almanat she'ani tzaddik," if a man says, "Here, I'm giving you this ring, and I'm marrying you, but there's a condition to the marriage, provided I am a tzaddik. If I'm a tzaddik, you're married to me." The Gemara says, "Mekudeshit," we say it's a valid marriage. Shema hirher b'tshuva. Maybe at that moment he had a moment of tshuva. So you see that it's possible. How do you deal with the fact that there are averot? It links, Ilan, to what you asked me yesterday or the day before. Why didn't we just tell him, do tshuva? And I said, you can't tell somebody to do tshuva. But a person can do tshuva from themselves, from within themselves. And just to have a moment of teshuvah, if one's going into a dangerous situation, or you're going into a challenging situation, in day-to-day life, it doesn't have to be a war. To be able to say, I'm feeling afraid. Why am I feeling afraid? Says the Orach Chaim, the Zohar, why am I feeling afraid? Because I've done things wrong. Sure, I've done things wrong, we all have. At this moment, I do tshuva, I regret what I've done wrong, I commit myself to the Ribbono Shel Olam, I want to do only that which is right, I want to be pure in my thoughts, in my deeds, in my moods, I want to be pure in everything I do. At this moment, that's where I am. Shema hirher b'tshuva. At that moment, it's a tzaddik gamur. That's the way to deal with fear. You deal with fear through tshuva. You can't deal with fear by removing the illusionary cause of the fear, because it is just an illusionary cause. The real cause is within us. And if we can elevate ourselves above the fears, you can't get rid of the fear. You can just elevate yourself above the fear and leave the fear behind. That's something that we can do. And the way we elevate ourselves above the fear is through teshuvah. And then we can come to the point, as the Rambam says, where we can trust on the fact that the Ribbono Shel Olam will do amazing nisim for us. Because if we're not, there's a beautiful Ramban on the Posuk as well, which you should look at. Ki mi sheyareh achar avtachat hakohen. When the Kohen has promised you that all will be well, einenu b'tach b'Hashem, you're lacking in bitachon. That's the biggest avera of all. What does the fear mean? I'm afraid. What are you afraid of? It means you're not trusting Hashem. That's the biggest avera. So if you can fix that, if you can get over your mistrust of Hashem or your lack of trust in Hashem, because there won't be miracles if you don't trust in Hashem. The only way there can be a miracle is if you feel that close to connection to Hashem. So what's the method? The method, if we say what we learn from here is that our biggest fears are within us. It's overcoming our own demons. How do we do that? We realize the cause of our fear are the things we might have done wrong. What do we do about that? We do a moment of teshuvah. What do we do without teshuvah? Once we've done our moment of teshuvah, we connect to Hashem. We feel trust in Hashem's word and Hashem's promise. And then we go about our daily business and we have bracha, and we have a special bracha and hatzlacha that the Ribbono Shel Olam promises us and takes care of us because of the fact that we're here for Kiddush Hashem, we're here to do His will and to make His name great.